Thank you very much, Professor Here. You are way too kind. Um, I like to thank IAFOR and University of Utah Global Campus for organizing this very meaningful event and having me here this afternoon. Whenever I come down to Songdo, I am reminded of a conversation I had with a businessman in New York City 10 years ago when I was ambassador there. His name is Mr. Gale, and he was running a company that has his name, Gale International. And this company was playing a very important role when they first started to build Songdo City. I think probably many of you already know that we are on a reclaimed land. So this used to be sea when I was a kid, and there was a beach, Songdo Beach, and Mr. Gale told me the story about his first visit to Songdo, probably in 1990s, and the mayor told him that the city of Incheon has an ambition to build an international city here. So he asked the mayor, please show me the place. So they chartered a helicopter and flew to this area, which was all sea that time. So he said, I see nothing but water. And the mayor said, yeah, but we are filling it. It's almost filled. So it's going to be a huge land will emerge here. So that was the ambition of the mayor. I forgot who the mayor was, but anyway. So Mr. Gale was convinced, and the company participated in it until about 10 years ago, but they are no longer here. Anyway, I'm giving you this story because it also has to do with the topic I'm going to talk about, which is globalization and sustainable development. Oh, clicker. Yeah, thank you. Somehow it's works. I want you to start by thinking about what development means. I'm giving you a question here. Is it more about advances the mankind as a whole can make in bettering their lives, or about narrowing gaps between the rich and poor at a certain point of time? I'm giving you this question because when I was a kid, South Korea started television broadcasting, actually in 1962. I don't know when in your own countries they started TV broadcasting, but I know that in the United States, they started in the late 1940s. And in Korea, it was 1962. But when you first start broadcasting, not too many people have television sets. As you can see on this chart, even in 1965, 3 years after the start of TV, only about 0.6% of our population had access to television. But in 30 years' time, in 1995, 112% of population had TV, which means some household had more than one TV, right? So what happened in Korea over 30 years' time certainly represents development. But if you focus on 1965, the question is not like, well, in 30 years' time, everyone will have a TV, so let's just wait for that. You cannot just say that. In 1965, question is, because only 0.6% of population has access to TV, how can we make it available to more people in our population? That's the question. That was the question. And internationally, there is what is called poverty line. Poverty line is right now $2.15 per day, but 30 years ago, it was $1 a day. So if you have a lot of people below poverty line, that means that you have extreme poverty. So the question is how to reduce extreme poverty. When I was Korea's ambassador to the United Nations, I was also president of UN ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council. And when I was first inaugurated as president of ECOSOC, I gave a speech. I gave a long speech, but I just give you here the first part of my speech. Let me start by sharing with you the story of two towns we can easily locate somewhere in the world today. In town A, people get up in the morning and think about how they will get enough food to feed their family. If they have a job, they are worried about keeping it. If they don't, there's not much chance of getting a new one. They still send their children to school, even if it burdens the family, because they want their children to have a better life than theirs. When someone is sick in the family, they try to look for any doctors they know, because if they just walk into a hospital, they might have to wait indefinitely to see one, or because they simply cannot afford a doctor, as there is no such thing as health insurance. In town B, people get up in the morning and think about whether they should buy a home or invest in the stock market, as the prices of both are going up fast. They're worried about eating too much meat and fat, which cause all kinds of adult diseases. When it comes to education, they want to give their children the best education they can afford, either at home or abroad. When someone is sick, they try to find out where the best doctor is, even if it costs beyond what health insurance covers. I can give you such realistic descriptions of the two towns as I have lived in both. In fact, my life so far has been divided roughly in half between these two towns. I did not move, but the town transformed itself from A to B. The transition from town A to town B is what is commonly called development. Unfortunately, there are still many countries in the world that have yet to experience this transition. But what happened to my country can happen to any other country. I cannot say that people in town B are necessarily happier than those in town A. For that matter, we might never understand how we can be happy. Still, the existential imperative we learn from our poverty tells us that it is more difficult to be happy with an empty stomach. It is not easy to be thankful to society when our children are sick and there's not much we can do about it. That is probably why we all pursue development despite our differences. And facilitating that pursuit, helping humanity achieve economic and social development in a sustainable environment is what we are doing here in the United Nations. My speech goes on, but I will stop here. And is our world sustainable? I want you to start from, for example, the use of fire 1,000,000 years ago. Someone who was very brave approached fire, probably approached a tree on fire, and he or she thought that he can take the fire to his home or cave, which he did against common wisdom. So he or she was very brave, and thanks to him or her, we now use fire for cooking, for warming, and for lighting. About 10,000 years ago, there was another revolution, which was called agricultural revolution, because humans started farming. We settled down. We stopped roaming around. We used to be hunters and gatherers, but we started farming. And that also changed our life dramatically. And then uh, either I'm changing page too fast or it's not. Where do I point? Or where is computer? Here? No, I want to go back. Yeah. There was a industrial revolution about 250 years ago, as we all know. And what was most important about it is that we started to use machines, most importantly, engines. We used engine to travel far and fast. Because until then, the only way of traveling long distance fast was using horse. Well, you can ride a cow, but cow is slow. You can ride a camel, but camel is not common. So whether 5,000 years ago in Egypt or 500 years ago in France, if you want to travel long distance fast, then you should ride a horse, right? In Korea, you can see that we used to ride horses in Joseon Dynasty, but our first train came at the end of 19th century, and we got tools to travel long distance fast. And that gave us globalization. You know, in other words, we shrunk the whole world. So the whole world is now much closer wherever you are. So wherever you came to Incheon, I bet that it took you, less than 20 hours to travel to Korea. But my late father was also a diplomat. When he was posted in Los Angeles in early 1950s, he told me the story how he flew from Korea to Japan, slept one night in Japan, flew to Hawaii, slept another night there, flew to San Francisco, slept another night there, and then took train down to LA. So it took 4 days for him to travel from Seoul to LA. Not in Joseon Dynasty, but in Republic of Korea, 7 years ago. So with globalization, we don't have to do that anymore. But we are paying for that. Because if you want to run engines so that you can take train, you can ride automobiles, you can ride airplanes, you need a lot of energy. So where do you get the energy? You cannot get that kind of energy by burning. It's all fire to me, actually. Someone found how to control fire 1 million years ago. To me, a layman like me, all engines are fire. So you need a lot of energy from fire, but you cannot get it by cutting down trees in the forest and burn them. So they dug out trees that died 100 million years ago. What is that? It's coal. It's called coal. Coal is trees that died 100 million years ago. So we dig it out and burn all of them. And then we have too much carbon in the air. We were not supposed to do that, actually, but we are doing that. Why? Because we want to have energy. Why do we want to have energy? We want to travel long distance fast. Why do you want to do that? We just want to do that. I don't know why, but we just want to do that. So we are paying for that. Paying for that. A lot of natural disasters caused by climate change. You know, atmospheric carbon dioxide and Earth's surface temperature. has correlation. You know, most people now believe that global warming, climate change has been caused by human activities. Maybe there might still be a few people who don't believe that, like Mr. Donald Trump, but mostly we believe that. Well, for actually until 1950s, there were only 3 regions in the world that use a lot of fossil fuel. They are North America, Western Europe, and Eastern Europe. So many countries in the world, including Asian countries, China and Korea and all of them, we used almost zero carbon. I mean, we pumped out almost zero carbon until 1950. So sometimes, you know, in the international community, countries like China argue like this. They talk to countries in Europe and North America. And it is you guys who are responsible for global warming because you guys have been pumping out carbon into air for the last 200 years. We just started it. And we need cheap energy to industrialize ourselves. And you're saying that cut down on our carbon emissions. It's not fair. Is it fair? Actually, it's not fair. But even if it's not fair, what can you do? You know, we have this principle called CBDR. What is it? It's common but differentiated responsibility. So we have a common responsibility. All the countries in the world, whether you have contributed to global warming or not, it doesn't matter. We have common responsibility, but differentiated. So which countries have more responsibility? European countries. I think in that sense, European countries are doing very well. A country like Germany. In my opinion, if all the countries in the world are doing exactly like Germany is doing, then we don't have climate change. Anyway, in today's world, China and United States account for almost half of all carbon emissions in the world. So China and United States don't cut down on their carbon emissions, then we are doomed. Actually, we are only talking about a little over 30 countries in the world. To be frank with you, it doesn't matter whether other countries reduce carbon emissions or not. Why? You might ask, wait a minute, these other countries might develop themselves in the next few decades and they might be developed. Yeah, that's true, but it's too late. We are talking about 20 years from now. So we are talking about only 40 countries in the world, whether they can cut down on their carbon emissions, including South Korea, which account for 2% of all carbon emissions. We had a pandemic for 3 years. Everyone knows that. And there is a concept called biomass. Biomass is putting the weight of all animals together. 10,000 years ago, when humans first settled and started farming, humans and domesticated animals, if you put their weights together, it accounted for less than 1% of all biomass. Now, humans and domesticated animals put together account for 96% of all biomass. Wildlife, only 4%. Why? How come? You can see the bar there. Which animal is the heaviest? Cows. Why so many cows? Because you guys are eating too much beef. That's why. Yeah, I'm not kidding. When I was a child, you know, I grew up in a middle-class home in Bukchon, and my mother was a university professor, so we were not terribly poor. When she went to grocery market, she bought a little bit of beef and put it in the soup. We only had Korean barbecue like bulgogi or galbi for my birthday, for Chuseok, for Seollal, other festivals, because beef is so expensive. So nowadays, anyone can have as much beef they like. Anyone can have as much Korean barbecue they like. How come? Too many cows, you know. We have too many cows because, not because we have more land and more grass, but because we are importing a lot of animal feed from countries like United States. United States is the largest producer of corn in the world. Half of their corn is not eaten by humans, animal feed. So we are feeding unnecessarily too many animals. What is the international community doing? We need some global governance. Some years ago, in actually about 40 years ago, there was a Brundtland report. Brundtland is the name of a former Norwegian prime minister. She was prime minister in her 30s. So after stepping down, she didn't have much to do. So she headed a UN commission, UN panel, and they came up with this report, Our Common Future. Nobody remembers what was in it 40 years ago, but they remember one thing, which is definition of sustainable development. This report is still remembered for defining sustainable development, which says development is development, that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Very important concept. So we adopted SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, 9 years ago. These are the 17 goals. I'm pretty sure that you are familiar with these 17 goals. And in the same year, we also agreed on Paris Agreement on climate change. Paris Agreement on climate change is reviewed every 5 years. So countries are supposed to update and improve their commitment. But actually, what is happening right now is the commitments are way short of meeting our target. Even if all the countries deliver their commitments, they expect that temperature rise will be around 2.5 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial time. Our original goal was 1.5 degree. Now revised goal is 2 degrees because 1.5 degree we already passed. We passed this year 1.5 degrees. So I think it's a joke if we still say our goal is 1.5. 2 degrees, I doubt we can meet it. But 2.5 degrees is very dangerous because if there is a 3-degree temperature rise, 1/3 of all living creatures will be gone and the earth will be irreversibly damaged. So we should stop at 2, which is very tough core. So the declaration by the SDG summit last year, the world leaders said the world was already off track in achieving the majority of SDGs before the COVID-19 pandemic. Without immediate course correction and acceleration of progress towards achieving the SDGs, our world is destined to face continued poverty, prolonged periods of crisis, and growing uncertainty. This year, they had the Summit of the Future in the United Nations, but I'm pretty sure that you guys have not heard much about it. Why not? Because there was not much of outcome. They didn't advocate it. They just met, but in my opinion, didn't come up with much of results. Because it's very sensitive issue. Countries in the world are very narrow-minded. They are bound by narrow national interest. That's why we need global citizenship education. Global citizenship education, in addition to being a national citizen, we all need to be global citizens. It's about our identity. It's about how we think of ourselves. According to the United Nations, definition of global citizen is can refer to the belief that individuals are members of multiple diverse local and non-local networks and social, political, environmental, and economic actions of globally minded individuals. Former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon once said, "We must foster global citizenship. Education is about more than literacy and numeracy. It is also about citizenry. Education must fully assume its essential role in helping people to forge more just, peaceful, and tolerant societies." It used to be called human rights education, but they merged all of them, human rights education, peace education, into global citizenship education sometime near 2015. Keep this. As I said, global citizenship is about identity. You know, we identify ourselves when we are a little kid. We identify ourselves as with our family. I am my mother's son. I'm my father's daughter, like that. As we grow, we identify ourselves with community. I'm I'm student of Utah University. I'm a member of a certain church. And then at a certain point in our time, in our life, we realize that we belong to a certain state. States are the most powerful institution humans have ever created. So we never get over with it. We are bound by citizenship, nationality. So it is a question of how we go beyond it, go beyond national citizenship and consider ourselves as a global citizen, as an earthling. It would be easier if aliens had invaded the earth. All of a sudden, we will realize that, oh, when we meet Japanese, for example, Koreans meet Japanese, and we say, oh, you are fellow earthlings. Oh, let's work together. You know, I'm very happy to see you. Same thing will happen if Ukrainians meet Russians. Oh, you are fellow earthling, so let's work together. But unfortunately, aliens have not invaded the earth, and they don't have any such plan in the near future. So without alien invasion, we should still be able to consider ourselves global citizens. A tough call. Global citizenship is about basically two things, two pillars. Universal values. There are certain values we share, no matter what kind of religion, culture, you know, tradition you have, such as we value our life, we value our next generation, we prefer peace to fighting. So these are our common universal values. Other than that, we respect all others or other differences as diversity. South Koreans don't wear hijabs, but here in this room, I can see some ladies wearing hijabs. So even though South Koreans don't wear hijabs, they can respect others' tradition because they must have reasons for wearing hijabs. Either they like it or because it's required by their tradition, by their culture, by their religion. So you respect what other people are doing, even though it's different from what you are doing. That's diversity. But sometimes we have a little problem because there are conflicts between universal values and cultural diversity. For example, even though you can respect wearing hijabs as diversity, in some countries, they have a tradition that if a female member of the family does something wrong, male members of the family can execute them, kill them. It's called honor killing. Is this part of tradition to be respected as diversity? No, you don't think so. Why not? Because it conflicts with the universal value. Human rights are universal values. Then naturally you come up with this question, who's deciding on that? What is universal values and what is diversity? Who decides on them? It's a tough question, isn't it? Well, our common sense, collective wisdom of humanity have to decide on them. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about Korea's development experience in global citizenship education here. As you know, Korea has transformed itself from a recipient country to a donor within a generation. And in the process, education played a great role because even in the 1960s, when Korea's per capita GDP was less than $100, 1960s, and half of all African countries' per capita GDP was already over $100. And South Korea's per capita GDP was below $100. But still, our primary school enrollment was over 90%. In many developing countries, primary school enrollment reached 80% thanks to MDGs. MDGs are Millennium Development Goals from 2001 to 2015. So that means that even though South Koreans were very poor, starving to death, they still sent their children to school instead of having them work. That probably played a big role, I think. So now South Korea is trying to work with international organizations like UNESCO to take advantage of our developmental experience so that we can share what we learned through the focus on education with other developing countries and work together for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
You'll stay up and join us for questions, right? Okay, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. That was an amazing presentation, really important dialogue and important comments. We're going to do a question and answer now. So if anyone does have a question, please raise your hand. But because I'm currently holding the mic, I'm going to ask the first question, okay? All right, so you have a room full of university educators. In your opinion, how can they take this message and best distribute it to the students, the rising generation, this generation of university students? What's the thing that the students these days would hear the most?
But I think what we can do to promote global citizenship is, one way of doing it is probably focus on a certain issue, like climate change. In our everyday life, we are so busy, we are occupied with a lot of mundane things, so we don't think about whether the global average temperature already passed 1.5 degrees Celsius this year. It made news, but not much of news for most of people. So you can raise awareness especially among youth, on this critically important issue, because the impacts of climate change will hit the next generation, not my generation. I will get out of the scene before anything happens to the world. So you can, that's why when it comes to global citizenship, we talk about global citizenship education. This generation, we cannot educate them too late, and actually it doesn't matter whether we educate them or not. What matters is how to educate the next generation so that they can consider themselves more as global citizens. You know, all these political leaders in many countries are occupied with issues at hand in their own country. They need to win in the elections, so they easily become populist. So rather they rather not speak about what's going to happen to the planet in 20 years. They want to focus on the election next year or next week, actually, in some countries. So, um, so unless you have pressure from people, pressure from civil society on your political leaders, please do not expect your political leaders to take actions in more proactive way. That's my advice.
Excellent advice. Thank you very much. Who else has a question? Just raise your hand and we'll bring a mic around for you. Yeah, so don't try to tackle it all at one time. Pick your battles. Good. There's one. Was there one back over here? You put your hands up if you ask a question. Yeah, good.
Thank you for your presentation. So my name is Evie from Indonesia, and I concern in this issue about indigenous people. So there are many indigenous people in Indonesia, and they face, we can call a critical condition because they lose their forest, their home. Government and corporate entities destroy their land in the name of development for massive palm oil plantation, a large scale of rice field, and even our new capital city. Um, However, from indigenous people, from their knowledge, we can learn how to protect the forest, the sea, and many sustainable things. So, development for them is not about building a new fancy house or having a lot of money. I think no, but for them, development is when their home, their forest is protected. So my question is, in this global citizenship education, where is the position of indigenous people? Because I think we need to accommodate their right to live in the way they want to live. Thank you.
Yeah, I think your question is very important. You know, I was when I was diplomat, I was posted in Singapore, Malaysia, and also in Brazil for a short period of time. And all these countries a common problem. When I first had my posting in Malaysia, almost 30 years ago, 27 years ago, there was a kind of air pollution disaster, which was called haze. It was called haze. I think it's a euphemism. It's not haze. It's air pollution coming from fire in oil palm plantation. In country like yours, Indonesia, they have huge oil palm plantation. And once these oil palms grow too tall, it's not easy to harvest. Harvesting becomes more expensive. So they kill oil palms. They can kill it by using chemicals, but that's also expensive. So they go for the cheap way of killing palm trees, which is fire. And then they put fire on them when it was likely to rain, but thanks to climate change, it doesn't rain. Then what happens? Fire goes on weeks, and the whole Southeast Asian region was covered by dust coming from fire. So after that, I heard that the governments of Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, they are taking more action to control them. But if you think about it, it's because these plantation owners want to make money. easy way. Well, some people might say that, no, it's not just them. You know, their money gives a lot of benefits to the nation as a whole because palm plantation is a very big business, very big industry. That's true. That's true, but you know, the question comes to you to choose between your country's economic growth and your people's health. But nobody really pose questions like that. They don't want to do that. Politicians don't pose questions like that. Even sometimes the media doesn't do that. So that's why I say you guys, people, should be doing that. You know, same story in Brazil when it comes to the question of preserving the rainforest along the Amazon. So, of course, we cannot just preserve our nature and leave people in poverty. We cannot do that. We have to get over with poverty. We need to reduce extreme poverty. So the question is how to balance these efforts. You know, when I gave you my speech about development, we all want to achieve development. But the question is how we can do it in a sustainable way. In the past, we didn't have to worry about sustainability because we didn't have capability to ruin the whole environment on Earth. Now we have that capability. You know, if you think about fishery, about 100 years ago, the only country that was exporting seafood, fishery products was Canada. Canada was exporting a lot of cod to Europe that they caught near Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. That was the only, probably seafood export, because even if you catch a lot of fish, it will go back. So you don't have a way of preserving your fish. So fishes were mostly eaten by people living close to the seaside. And then they invented refrigeration technology and ocean-going ships. And started by Japanese, followed by Koreans and Chinese. They went out to the ocean and took all the fish, caught all the fish. Now, tuna is an endangered species. Tuna is a very favorite sashimi for many people, including Japanese. If we leave it that way, then our grandchildren will say, once there was a fish called tuna, but they no longer see it. So now we have capability to ruin the whole world irreversibly. So we should control ourselves.